the 2020 Ake Arts and Book Festival. And we're doing a panel, or a series of panels actually, today as part of the virtual festival. As you all know, everything is virtual now. And so we're doing it virtual. And the first panel on our end this morning, so this morning is like New York time. So if you're in Lagos, it's probably sometime in the evening. And then our panelists are in different countries, so they'll also tell us what time they are in their own countries. But anyways, welcome. And I'd like to say, before we move any further, there's Chibuka Obumselu. I hope I said that correctly. So Chibuka, you have to correct and say your name properly. She's the co-host.
Yeah, that's right.
The panels today. So, hi Chibuka, and great to have you as a panelist.
It's great to be here.
Before we do that, very quickly, let's introduce ourselves, and then we'll introduce our guests. So, Chibuka, you are the young one, and you're the lady. And ladies go first. Say 1 minute something about yourself to our audience.
Okay, great. My name is Chibuka Obumselu. I'm a writer and editor, but I'm also the operations lead at One Read Africa. One Read Africa is an initiative that provides Africans across the continent with one book by an African author every month. So for 21 days every month, we give you access to an ebook and an audiobook. And at the end of the 21 days, you get an opportunity to interact with the author through podcasts, interviews, live sessions, and also the opportunity to win books and other prizes. So it's great to be here today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chibuka, for a nice introduction. As for my part, my name is Wee. So I am talking to you from Brooklyn, and from time to time you might hear lots of noise here because, you know, NYPD and fire department and that's be joining you from New York City. Our panel today is on police brutality in Africa, and our panelists are Titsi Dagaremba. I'm almost going to pronounce that your last name with a Yoruba accent. I was going to say Dagaremba, but you have to tell us what.
That's actually correct.
Oh, really? That's how to say it.
Yeah, it sounds much better that way.
All right. Welcome to our panel. You're a very well-known person as a writer and as a troublemaker. You're going to tell us a little bit about your recent troubles. But first, let's get to meet you. Tell us a few things about yourself. And before we get into the full conversation around issues around brutality, police, and otherwise.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be on the panel, and I'm really grateful to have this opportunity. I am a writer and filmmaker. I live in Harare. I run several programs to capacitate African women filmmakers, and that's what I do for a living.
Okay. But you, as a writer, some of us are familiar with you. Most of us are very proud of you because of your accomplishments as a writer, but also as an activist. And you recently have just experienced what many troublemakers, artists, people of conscience experience. They get thrown in jail from time to time. Our host, Lola Shinayi, who we should actually thank for this panel and for the past, for the festival, for the yearly festival. Great job that she's been doing, bringing all of us together. Suggested that that might not be your recent breaking with the law might not be your first and may very well not be your last. So we need to hear something about that one and a bit about your experience on in Zimbabwe. I love Zimbabwe as a country. I think it's one of the most Pan-Africanist countries that we have, consciously so. It's important that your experience, that you share your experience with us.
Thank you. Yes. Would you like me to do that now or later on?
You can give us a little bit before we go to Master.
Okay. Yes, I was arrested at the end of July because I took part in a demonstration, a peaceful demonstration against corruption and misgovernance in Zimbabwe. And yeah, I will have more to say about that later on.
Oh, very well. Thank you. So, Chibuka, do you want to introduce Ms. Ramaru, or should I go ahead and do that?
I think I can do that. Thank you.
Great.
So we have Masi Ramaru, who is a junior research fellow at the AGI, and she works closely with the Young Women's Leadership Project and the AGI partners on a variety of projects. She's completed her
All right, looks like we lost her for a minute. All right. So
her honors degree in gender and transformation at the University of Cape Town.
So welcome.
Hello, Masi, can you hear me?
Oh, good.
I can hear you.
Oh, Chibuka, you are dropping in and out, so just be a little aware of that. Are you with us now, Chibuka? Okay, looks like she's dropped out. That's an internet issue. So it's me and you, Kaliboga Ramaru. Kaligboka. Kialiboha.
Yes.
It's a lovely name. Yeah. Welcome to our panel today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you want us to know about you?
I think Chibuka has mentioned some of my work that I did with the AGI, which I actually concluded recently at the end of September. But mostly my work is around, I kind of navigate between multiple feminist and queer spaces within the Cape Town and South African context. And mostly now I see myself within also a feminist collective, a queer feminist collective, where we have a film festival called the Queer Feminist Film Festival, where we support and curate work within township settings to celebrate work by queer feminist activists in the township who are doing amazing work. But like I said, I mean, I'm in various feminist formations within the South African context.
Well, thank you for joining us. And somebody special also has joined us. Lola Shinae has joined us. She promised to join us if Chibuka's internet connection keeps dropping. Thank you, Lola, for joining us.
Thank you so much. And thank you to Mase and Sitsi again for agreeing to do this with us. I'm really excited and looking forward to hearing your stories and telling us a little bit about the police and all the naughty things that they do in your different countries. And then maybe we'll talk about my country as well.
And of course, Lola is the founder and CEO. Correct me what your proper title is.
It doesn't really matter. Let's talk about police brutality.
We will come to it.
Forget me.
But she's the founder of. There are people who might not know you. So she's the founder of the Ake Arts and Book Festival. So I must say, one of the things I'm really interested in finding out about you as part of your introduction, as a young activist, were you involved in the fees must fall phenomenon in South Africa?
I was hoping that question wouldn't come up, but I was. I was part of the Roads Must Fall. I was part of the Roads Must Fall and Fees Must Fall movement. In fact, if we're speaking about police brutality, I've had first-hand experiences with police brutality, but also just general state repression. And in the context where communities and sometimes individuals are looking to hold governments and states that are claiming legitimacy accountable for some of the commitments that they've made. So I think I have many tales, as long as well as some other students who've organized at the time. Of also, interestingly, just the way that state apparatus and also the police, for example, whose central work is to protect communities, also function within particular institutions. So I was in one of those institutions who did, of course, because of their proximity to whiteness, at the University of Cape Town, there was a lot more negotiating with the police that could take place, and the university protecting their image before they actually, got to a point where they gave the police the space, versus other universities and other students who found themselves in historically Black universities and did not have the benefits of negotiating. One of my key memories from that time was being at the University of the Western Cape and walking through a barricade of police to get to students, and a raging bonfire in between the two of them. And I know that in my own context, that would have never happened. And I think it's indicative of the mercilessness of marginalized people, of the kind of violence that marginalized people have to deal with around the world, and especially when it comes to holding, whether it's institutions and state and the state, accountable.
Mm. So we're in good company. You're, troublemakers, both of you, and so we're going to have a wonderful conversation. Let's basically start where Lola said us to start, which is from your own experiences as women, as African women, and as activists. What do you understand as police brutality through your own experiences in your own different countries? Let's start with Tsitsi. You're muted, Tsitsi.
Myself, thank you. Yeah, I was saying that's a really interesting question, because when we talk about brutality, we often really think about overt violence, where people are really being physically abused. But in Zimbabwe, I have come to see that we have different stages of brutality. So I would define it as anything that infringes upon the security of the individual. And when I define it like that, I see that we have a whole range of actions that I would group together under police brutality. However, one of the things that I have also seen is that those of us who do not have occasion to think things through may not then understand that certain actions are instances of brutality. And I'll give you an example. Before we had the coup in 2017, which deposed Robert Mugabe and ushered in Mr. Mnangagwa, who is our president now, we had a police presence that was absolutely daily. It was endemic to life. And the reason for this police presence, whether it was on the road or wherever, was really to extort money, because the government was bankrupt and they had to find a way to pay the police. And so the police would extract fines on the road for the most spurious reasons, absolutely arbitrarily. And they were spot fines, and a lot of the money would go into people's pockets. And I remember I once had a broken window, not a window, but a broken back rear mirror. And I had seen that this was broken. And so I wanted to go into town to buy the new one. So I came to a roadblock and I was stopped. And I said, look, this is unreasonable. Our law is defined by a reasonable person. Actually, it's a reasonable man, but I'll say a reasonable person. And this mirror got broken. I haven't been fined for it before. I haven't been stopped. You can see that I have not been offending with this mirror. And I need to get to town to buy a new one and have it fixed so that I am once more doing things properly. And I was actually told that if I let you go, I will not reach my quota. So basically, the police action was not about securing property and maintaining law and order. It was about extracting from citizens in order to fill quotas, because the government had misgoverned and had not run the economy properly, and the country was almost bankrupt. And so for me, I would also include those kinds of instances as police brutality, because then you have situations where, for example, people are stopped on roads and they're trying to rush to hospital, and maybe the last money that they have is taken away from them, or they are delayed and they end up becoming critically ill or even passing away. This has happened under these circumstances. So that to me is brutality. It is a more passive kind of brutality, but I would definitely call it a kind of brutality. And then, of course, we have the other kind of brutality, which is much more overt and much more actively aggressive, which has been steadily increasing in Zimbabwe. We have a strange situation in Zimbabwe in that we have never been free of violence. And I'm sure that many other African countries have the same situation. But if you go back into the history of Zimbabwe, the founding of Rhodesia in 1890, that was done with violence and bloodshed, great bloodshed. I mean, we are not told about the kind of battles that were done between Cecil Rhodes and his British South Africa police and the local people, but it was incredible and very bloodthirsty. And we have never actually had law that was instituted in order to protect the rights of the citizen. If we say that Black people were also citizens in the country, the laws were always about extraction and exploitation for an enclave. And so police brutality has really been part and parcel of state formation in my country, and I think in other countries as well. And this was the case at independence, where we were no longer Rhodesia, but then became Zimbabwe. There had been violence in the liberation struggle. So this would not, well, there was police brutality in that we had the guerrillas who were coming in, and the security forces of the Rhodesians had to act against them. And so you would find that there was a lot of brutality against the citizens, Black citizens at that time. But we also had brutality that was directed against Black citizens from the guerrillas for one reason or another. So at independence, we had a blanket amnesty. In 1979, there was an amnesty and another one in 1980 after the election. The reason for the 1980 amnesty was that there had been a lot of election violence. ZANU-PF had not desisted from the violent practices that it had had as a guerrilla army, a guerrilla organization, and had continued this around the election. Then we went into the 1983, where we had the genocide in the south of the country, Matabeleland. And the interesting thing is, because now we have the guerrilla element coming in, is that it doesn't really have to be only police brutality. There are kinds of like groups that form with some people from different branches of the security. So you would have some people from the police, some people from the army, some people from the intelligence forming units and carrying out excuse me, and carrying out these acts of genocide. And for most of the elections, we have had that again. And so for me, it really is a question of state violence, organized state violence, and it might be perpetrated by the police, or it might be perpetrated by other state agents, whether they are uniformed, whether they're security, or whether they're mercenaries who are just hired in order to continue this violence. So we find that in Zimbabwe, there has actually been an escalation of it. And I don't really distinguish just between the police and the police, because at the moment, we find that there is not a clear distinction. You will find that in cases where you would expect to see police, you will also see army. And so it really is a security violence. But I would just like to give you some figures about it and how it has escalated in the last few years, the last couple of years. Although I have said that it's been endemic since the state was formed. And this also goes for the formation of the state of Zimbabwe out of Rhodesia. Violence, brutality against citizens was endemic. So since 2017, in 2018, we had 24 abductions where citizens were just pulled off the road. Some of them were not heard of again. Many are then dumped somewhere, having been tortured in various ways and beaten. The beating consists often of beating the soles of the feet, because the perpetrators believe that that is not easily detected. Also beating on the back. And we find that the beatings on the back are so severe that they significantly often result in kidney damage, and people have been known to pass away from that kidney damage after the beating, because it's not an injury that is immediately evident. So in 2018, we had 24 abductions. Then in 2019, that went up to 67 abductions. And that is when Zimbabweans began to really be vociferous about talking against this kind of behavior. And so this year, 2020, we have seen 15 abductions, and most of them were around the July 31st protest, which was the one that I also participated in. So that's 106 abductions. And the amazing thing is that there is total impunity for all of these cycles of violence that I've been talking about since the formation of the state in 1890. State agents have been in a position to commit these acts of violence with total impunity. During the armed conflict here in 1975, the Rhodesians instituted the first act that gave impunity to people who were fighting for the Rhodesian cause. Then, as I mentioned, there was the amnesty of 1979 and 1980, and sporadic election violence that has flared up. I call it sporadic, but it was intense at the time. For example, 2008, we had 200 dead through election violence and about 1,500 people beaten up. And none of those people are ever brought to justice, or if they are brought to justice, they are given presidential pardons or clemency orders. And so apart from the brutality itself, we have the situation of impunity, which makes people feel that they can do these things without the fear of being brought to book. And then this gives a sense of entitlement, because they then feel that their objectives, which cause them to commit this violence in the first place, are a right, and that they have the right to utilize any means whatsoever to attain those objectives. And so we've also had 25 extrajudicial killings since the new government came into power in 2017. And these are the ones that are recorded and verified. And as we all know, the actual numbers are probably higher because people are afraid to report. They don't have the means of documentation to verify. And what we have seen recently in Zimbabwe is a change in the way the government has begun to behave. Earlier on, they used to talk about abductions and state brutality as the work of a third hand, which was said to be unknown. But of course, people came back to them and indicated that it was their responsibility to engage with a third hand in a way that ensured the security of the citizens. And so since then, they have started calling them fake abductions. They say that people fake their own abduction and torture. And the most current case of that is the case of three NDC women who were arrested on the 13th of May after a demonstration. And they were then found on the 15th of May, and they related the ordeal that they had been through. And the state has now, and they reported it, and the state has now charged them with faking an abduction. And they are actually in the judicial process now for that charge. No one has been charged with their abduction. There was said to have been an investigation with a video produced, and it isn't really worth talking about. It's an insult to the intelligence of any person. But the case against them for faking their abduction is going ahead. And I was in court this morning, and I actually met one of the young women, Joanna Mamombe. So now the state is criminalizing reporting state violence and brutality. So this is to say that the numbers are probably much lower than the ones that I have reported here. But it is a problem in Zimbabwe, and the fact that we are having this conversation in the wake of the Lekki massacre shows that it is not only a problem in Zimbabwe. And of course, I think most of us as Africans have heard when we speak to our fellow Africans of the dire situation concerning such state brutality in most of the countries on the continent.
Wow, thank you very much. I think we still muted. You haven't unmuted yourself yet,
Oh, hi.
So I'm thank you so much for that, Tsitsi. Giving us plenty to talk about, but it is tragic, the sort of resonance. I mean, the things that you're saying, and I'm just sort of thinking, okay, that sounds really familiar. It's so similar to what's happening in Nigeria from the extortion. But I mean, what I find really difficult to understand is if it was just the extortion, if it was just let me take some money and go, well, that would be one thing. But it's just how they go about. I mean, it's just brutal, the wickedness, the callousness. And then with the murders, it just leads one to wonder, why and how are they able to get away with this, and how have they been able to get away with it for so long? But I would really like to come back to Massey and just ask you, being a feminist, what impact does that have when you're looking at police brutality as a thing in South Africa? As a woman, are there other layers to it, to the way that it impacts women in South Africa?
Yeah, I think Titi actually touched on some of the points that I wanted to kind of just kind of contextualize around South Africa and the idea of police brutality and the different ways that it functions. And I think very key that I want to rehash is the idea of the way that the state understands police, the role of the police, and understanding it more and defining it more as a tool of violence rather than a state tool that's meant to protect citizens. And one particular idea for me comes from the point of a statement that the current the Minister of Police made in 2009 while they were police commissioner. And they stepped down and then entered as the police minister, and that's their current position, Becky Cele, made a very important statement saying that the police must kill, they must shoot to kill. So kill now and then worry later. And this is a statement that was made in reference to a scourge of confrontations with the police. So instances where it was heists and robberies and police were being shot at. But my concern about the statement was that it actually removed itself from the context from which these kind of that the police functions in, with their communities and vulnerable communities who often find themselves at the center of this crossfire. And for police forces and police people who are at the root of some of the things that Titi has mentioned around the brutality, that statement goes beyond just speaking about a shootout between police and a group of people, but that extends to communities, that extends to how communities function and the kind of support that the relationship that communities build with the police. I mean, we also see that in the way that the long history, just in the last 10 years, some of the key nodes of instances where police, instead of protecting, have violated citizens and have expressed the most brutality against them. And sometimes they claim to have due cause, and then other moments are completely irrational. And this is even outside of the state itself. It's a combination of the state. It's the combination of the state and police acting on their own will. And then it's also a combination of senseless violence. And if we track from the time of Andries Tetane, who was dragged in a community and who's since died, was dragged from the back of a police van through the community during a service delivery protest where his community was protesting for access to water, clean water and sanitation, who was tied up at the back of a police van and then dragged through the community and died because of that. And from the Andries Tetane moment, we go into Marikana, where we see an intentional use of force and weaponizing of the police by our current president Cyril Ramaphosa through the criminalization of mine workers, when he clearly stated this is not an action around the rights of miners, but this is a criminal act, a clear criminalization, and how this role can then be negotiated and maneuvered to serve the needs of the people in power, to repress, and to kill. Essentially kill in a post-apartheid South Africa. And I put that in quotations because I think in a sense, it's post-apartheid in terms of law and governance, but so much of it reflects an apartheid state. In a post-apartheid context, in a country that's known such great pain connected to police violence, that a former struggle stalwart, now politician, and a servant of the people would then utilize and weaponize the police to that extent against communities. And during as we move through the years and coming even as close as this year, we start to see police brutality coupled by the militarization of our streets because of the lockdown. And we see the senseless killings of Khosa, who was in his yard and was approached by police and beaten because a beer was found in his house. And we were under lockdown, and nobody was supposed to have access to alcohol. And even as close to somebody as Nathan Julius, who was a 16-year-old young man with Down syndrome, who was senselessly shot by the police, and whose body was dumped. And the police said that it was a mistake. It was a mistake. And in all of these instances, while we can name people and we can name instances, what's lacking is the accountability and the right, as Titi also reiterated, that's the right for police to be lawless, be outlaws with no repercussion, right? Because they are somehow the holders of the law and need to be protecting communities. But because of the power that's been given to them from this title and this approach that keeps shifting the ways that this power is being negotiated, then we are sitting at a space where police have the right to abuse in the way that they that they see fit without repercussions. And often we don't hear about those moments of accountability, or we don't hear of them often enough. And if I enter, recently there was a case of a young woman who was, a few of us supported, who was beaten by their partner and the friend's partner, and went to the police in a rage, went to the police station and forgot their masks because it's part of lockdown regulations, and was chucked out of the police station because they didn't have a mask. And because of their identity as well, they were told that, look, this sounds like a dispute, right? It sounds like an internal dispute that's got no place in a police station, but something to be resolved within the confines of your home. And I think that in itself, maybe just speaking about the experiences of women in South Africa and the police and the context of police brutality is also how we build a relationship between the comfort that women have to kind of report cases of domestic violence, or gender-based violence, and femicide, which are skyrocketing in South Africa, like different parts of the continent and also the world, without feeling like they're being persecuted, without the feeling that the police the police feel like they can't help them because it's an internal dispute. And again, I mean, the main question for me is how a state tool like the police still maintains this private and public divide when there's a clear violation, when there's a clear cry for help, and there's a space for them to intervene. And I think histories of the way that police have functioned in South Africa, while at a lesser degree is weaponized, while the police is weaponized at a lesser degree by political figures, that still stays prominent, but also the brutality also is defined according to racial lines in South Africa. And if I'm to reflect about my time in the student movement, like I mentioned, key things about the particular universities who are considered to be former Black universities would see more arrests happen in those universities. We'd see police negotiating at a lesser degree. Would see a lot more brutality and beatings and fighting. There are a number of pictures where we've seen students holding barricades against, physically fighting and in confrontations with the police. Whereas in our own context, we could speak a lot more and rationalize a lot more, and had the benefit of being in the spaces that we're in, the benefit of being in former white institutions. And that even translated itself outside of those spaces, where there were a number of times where comrades of ours would get arrested, and outside of the police station, we'd go look for them, and we'd stand in solidarity with them. And we'd have white students say, let's create a circle around you because we know the police will not do anything to us. And on every occasion that's happened, where we've had a barricade of white students around us, the police have hesitated with the force or even acting at all. So, I mean, it's a very clear point in the sense of South Africa, is the idea that police brutality is something that is perpetuated on multiple levels, but also is quite racialized in the ways that it acts. It's racialized because of the degrees of impact that we see it being enacted through. And even in the case where communities have organized, very, very often when communities organize, the police would be present to disperse communities with rubber bullets and with tear gas. But just 2 weeks ago, or at least a week ago, I think it's 2 weeks ago, there was a case of a farm manager, a white farm manager in South Africa, who was assaulted in custody. They've got 2 black suspects. And we had a community of farmers, white farmers, who went to a police station, set a police van alight, stormed the police station and the courtroom, demanding that these perpetrators be handed over to them so that they can deal with them. And in that moment, we saw complete inaction from the police. No police van showed up. No one was held accountable. No one was arrested. And all of it was recorded. All of it was caught on camera. But we did not see the police actively intervene. And I think a lot of, on social media, the outrage was there around if this was a community of people of color or a low income community, or even students who've been in the student movement came forward and said, this is not the kind of treatment we got from police. The police was so eager to unleash on us. The police was so eager to practice this power over us. And so what do we say about a police that's selective about who it protects and who it unleashes on? And how do we also negotiate a state tool that is supposed to be for community protection, but is one of the key perpetrators of violence within communities, has become a very unreliable, even protective source to communities, and kind of is an apparatus that exists, but only is proactive so far as its response to power, so far as it asserts its power, and very little action is often seen from it when it needs to protect communities and when communities come for help.
Thank you very much, Mase Ramaru. That was very interesting. Thesis that you just gave us about South Africa, police brutality, and in South Africa. I think we have someone else joining us soon. I'm not sure, but as soon as I'm able to confirm that, I will let you know.
We have Okikiade.
We have Okikiade.
Okikiade.
Hello.
Hi,
I'm
Okikiade.
actually just listening. I don't know whether I joined this incorrectly. I'm so sorry.
Well, oh, you're just listening. All right, so keep listening and thank you. And yeah, so I'm interested. There's something interesting. Okay, both of you, Titsi and Mase, your thesis is something that we recognize, right? So Lola in Lagos is talking about how this is very familiar to her on some level. I'm in New York City. I'm thinking to myself, this is also very familiar to myself, right? But there's something that we all share, the brief history of colonialism in Africa, right? And the formation of our police systems, so that we have, I mean, clearly, even in this conversation, you're demonstrating parallels of experiences that are pretty not just mind-boggling, but these are shared experiences, that we have parallels about. So part of the question that comes to my mind, and I want us to get this out of the way, is when we think about policing, in what context can we compare before and after? So we know we have the colonial experience in policing, right? We know we have the more current, if you like, post-colonial experience in policing. But before then, there were always questions of that one could now call policing questions. And I'm wondering how in Zimbabwe, if you have any thoughts on that, Tsitsi, if you've done any research around that subject, how we can contextualize, the before and the present. You're muted.
You're asking before being the colonial era and the post-colonial era. Is that
yes,
the question?
Because
or the independence,
right,
the time of independence. Yeah. In Zimbabwe, increasingly, the popular sentiment is that we have a change of occupancy rather than a change of system. And just today, on social media, there was a discussion about we were liberated from white colonialism by the nationalist armies and the nationalist political parties only to enslave us. And again, and then the question came up whether one can call being moved from one kind of oppression and bondage into another kind of oppression and bondage can actually be called liberation. So that is where we are at. The differences would simply be in the nature of the incumbents, but not in the nature of the system. And that is something that I think we are beginning to see very clearly in Zimbabwe. And I think this goes back to something that I touched on when I spoke earlier, in that police brutality, state agent brutality is in fact state engendered. It stems from the state. As Mase so correctly said, it depends on how the state views the institution of the police. Does the state view this institution as an instrument of protection of the security of citizens, their own physical security and the security of their property? Or does it see the police as an institution of aggression towards the citizens, a tool of violence that can be used to extract whatever the state wishes to extract from the citizens? And we do have a history in this part of the world of the police being formed as an institution within an extractive system. And so I think we should not be surprised when we see these kinds of extractive behaviors and systems that the police exhibit. And so really for me, the difference is one in the nature of the agents, but not so much in the system and the way the police are deployed against the majority of citizens.
Masi, do you have any questions? By the way, Lola, if you do, please jump in. And we shouldn't just do back and forth questioning. It would be more interesting, I think, if we actually try to make a conversation about it. So anybody can ask anybody, or say something to anybody. You don't have to look to me to do that. We're having a very interesting conversation here. But Masi, before we leave that question, one of the things that is very clear, I think, to those of us or to people who are studying society, is that the countries that are represented in this conversation, right? Zimbabwe, South Africa, Nigeria, United States of America, are countries that actually went through the colonial experience as well, but different phases of the colonial experience. Yeah. And in that sense, South Africa, to my mind, was the experience in South Africa, the experience of apartheid, was the final culmination of the colonial experience itself. It was the perfection of the colonial system. Yeah. So how has your society transitioned from that apartheid space to a new society that was meant to replace it? And where do you think you are, given everything else that we can talk about the last 1 year, the civil disobedience, the unrests in South Africa itself, the fee must fall movement, which opened the eyes of so many people to realities that actually were right there in front of us. So talk to us, when you see something like what's going down in Lagos, how do you see how far you've come as a society?
Well, I mean, I think what's become most apparent is the fact that there are so many intersections between our experiences across the continent, and in different regions around how, even in the context of South Africa being post-apartheid, like I mentioned, the big revelation that's been quite clear from the beginning is the fact that, and Tsitsi mentioned as well, that we've entered institutions that have existed and have had particular laws that are meant to exclude, but what we've occupied, we've just become the occupants, and we haven't been critical in the ways that we shift and push against these institutions. And this goes beyond, I mean, South Africa, this goes beyond the police. We, at every avenue in education, we're seeing the impacts of generations of oppressive systems that weaponize education and that weaponize the police. But those institutions have changed slightly, but in the important, but have remained the same, where it really matters in the way that they police, in the way that they engage citizens, in the way that they make themselves accessible and open to citizens. And so the question is then, how do we make that shift when we have to straddle the fact that we come from a very dark and difficult history that requires a lot of engagement and healing from and speaking through, and also making space for, and also accountability maybe for it, but also the fact that we find ourselves having governments, having officials who have forgotten the essence of why they've occupied those spaces. And these institutions continue to crumble in their ways as well. They continue to crumble because they are also stuck under the pressure of this combination, the intersection of a dark history and dysfunctional institutions and unaccountable leaders. And I think it's also quite easy to draw parallels across the continent. Like I mentioned, around the fact that one thing that's consistent is the weaponization of state apparatus and protection, the military, the police, by ruling parties, by leaderships, whatever political leaderships, and by public figures who have vowed to protect communities. And South Africa, I mean, what's happening in Nigeria right now is really reminiscent, for example, of South Africa in 2012, during the Marikana massacre. We see an uprising of a community then as young people in Nigeria who are saying that we are being oppressed and we're not, this state institution that's supposed to be protecting us and ensuring, you know, our safety is doing the opposite, but we have become the victims of it. And perpetrators, they've become their perpetrator. And in South Africa in 2012, it was the same with the Marikana massacre, where I've seen the narrative being about the protest being hijacked by these rogue, you know, the rogue elements who are trying to topple the government. And while that there could be some truth in it, and there could be a need to hold these elements accountable, but how do we reconcile with literally communities of people dying, large numbers of people dying, and the blood of those people are in the hands of the state officials who are okay with this. But we also know that the root of it is to silence any other person who would think that there's space to speak out against the government. And we see that in the silence and the negotiating. We'll continue to see that with commissions that continue to negotiate and bring other stories and uncover. And we'll find an individual accountable. And the worst that will happen is for the person to lose their job. But the reality is that in South Africa, on the 16th of August, 2012, 34 people lost their lives in the hands of the police. And the reality is that on the 3 days ago, in Nigeria, a large number of citizens who were asking for accountability from its government were killed and died at the hands of their government, at the hands of their police. And the same police that they've repeatedly said are a danger to them. And that danger has played itself out quite clearly, and also has continues to expose the role of politicians and political leadership in maintaining privilege and maintaining position. And part of maintaining that position, I mean, I've been listening and I've been getting a lot of seeing what's happening before the massacre that happened recently, and how there were reports of the police saying that their loyalty is to the president and they're there for the president. And that's surprising. How are you there for a president when your purpose and your aim is to protect citizens? And the president is one bad citizen out of all of these citizens that you're accountable for. So how do you conclude that as your role, your work is to protect citizens, every Nigerian citizen, but you conclude that your loyalty lies with one citizen? And that shows us clearly then how untransformed our institutions remain, because they still function within the confines of power. And they always see themselves aligned mostly to power and not to citizens and to the society and the communities of people that they need to protect.
Thank you very much, Massey. How incredible. So I do have another question that I was going to ask you, because there were so many things that you said that I wanted, that got me thinking. But one of the arguments or debates in Nigeria was when the EndSARS movement started, then there was the idea of, no, let's fight for reform within the police. Is this a debate or an argument that you often hear in South Africa as well? And then to follow up, I was just going to ask you what reform looks like. Where does one start with all these problems that are in front of us? It's hard not to feel helpless and hopeless as an ordinary citizen, because it feels like you can't win. So what's the starting point to kind of finally get the police to understand that they're here to protect us and not to kill us? That's my question.
I mean, I think.
Can we hold that question? Can we hold that question for a moment, please? We have someone who just joined us.
She's still muted.
Okay, I guess.
Please introduce yourself.
Okay, good evening. I'm enjoying the discussion so much, and I can relate to everything because I live in South Africa, in Pretoria, so I understand all what Massey is saying. And I'm actually very glad to be just listening. But just to a kind of maybe answer to what Lola has just said, what is the reform like? How could we ever get a reform when, as we've all known, the police only play to government and to the people who pay them? And I think for me, the reform can only start if we have good governance. If we have governors who treat us as human beings, we need to humanize. We need to humanize our systems and our institutions. And I don't know how this can be except we have good governance. And how do we have good governance? It's very, very difficult. Because you can see even the young people who are striving now to say things have to change, they are being killed. And I really don't know where we're going. It's a very, very sad situation for most African countries where we have policemen, basically brutalizing us. And this leaves a whole lot of psychological effect, not just on on the society as a whole, I've been, I don't even know how to describe it. In the last 3 days, I couldn't just bring myself to what was happening. So good governance is one. People coming out in spite of the danger and in spite of the murdering of people, still just being there and insisting on having their voices heard. I'm not too sure how we can get good governance in Africa. It's just something that I can't understand. I think it borders on followership too. And it's this aspect that really baffles me, in the sense that it's almost like all of us, maybe politicians, let me not say all of us, I mean, well, maybe all of us, we have a part to play, but we don't know how we want to play this part, especially because, you know, people who are really working so hard and they have conscience and they want to conscientize the society and all of that, they are never really taken so seriously. They work so hard all of their lives to bring change. It doesn't happen. And I think until we as followers, we as people who are governed, actually let those that are in authority know that the power, that the thing that they have is given to them by us. And how we're going to get to this is what I don't understand, because it's only us that can give that power. And if we refuse to give that power, I think we'll be moving towards something that we can begin to build on. But without us making up our minds and taking this power away, because we invest that power in them. If, for example, we stop voting for them, people tell me, oh, it's not possible, because even if you don't, even if you do that, they will still declare themselves as winners. So I really don't know. That's what I can contribute. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're most welcome. I was going to suggest that there's been a lot of conversation here on issues. You know, we've talked about impunity, right? There's an outstanding question on police reform. But before we take that question, which is a very important question, I think that we should get either Lola and Chibuke to give us some sort of like an update, if they have any, about what's going on in Lagos right now as we speak. You know, but I want you guys to just think about it. Societies goes through transitions. Zimbabwe went through a transition to a new government, and there was a lot of expectations, and some of us were saying, well, you know, in the United States, there were more people advocating for former President Mugabe for their own, you know, our own politics here has its own definition. And in South Africa, you've been going through this attempt, young people to like struggle with the system, to change the system. So the question of police reform is important. But if you look at many of the images that we've seen in the past few days coming out of Nigeria, you see young people actually going out of their way to ask for reform for the police. To treat the police humanely. They cook for themselves, they provide food for the police, they provide beverages for the police. In other words, there was an attempt to cultivate the police as well. And obviously, it failed. But before we go further into the question of, you know, the whys and the reforms, give us a quick update, if you can, about what's going on in Lagos right now, both of you, either Lola or Chibuka.
Chibuka hasn't had a chance to say anything, so
yeah, let's get
young. I think it's important to hear her voice as well.
Um, okay, so status update from Lagos. This is a couple of hours into the curfew that the governor declared on Tuesday afternoon, which he did in a vague statement, if I may say, because they went and said 24-hour curfew, but then we found out that they meant an indefinite all-day curfew. Since that time, a couple of young people decided that they were not going to leave the streets. They were going to stay and make their voices heard. And the government made the choice to send out security agents to shoot these people down. And some of them were killed. A large number of them were killed. And this wasn't only in Lagos State or only in Lekki, as most people are aware, but in several parts of Lagos and in other states across the country. Since that time, two more states have handed down curfews, indefinite curfews. Ekiti State, also in southwest Nigeria, and Abia State in southeast Nigeria. And there has been widespread
Oh dear.
violence. The homes of top officials raided and looted. There's been violence, and so many innocent people have been hurt. People who do not have anything to do with the government, right? And these acts have been perpetrated by people we say are thugs, hoodlums. But some of these people are also just people who have had some kind of seething anger that has finally boiled over. You can't live in a society where you see people feeding fat off the riches of the nation, off what should go around people, and they don't feel some kind of resentment. They do. And you can't quell their anger by offering them maybe 1,500 today to do one small thing, or 3,000. After a while, it won't be enough. And that's basically what has happened. The government unleashed the beast on innocent Nigerians. At this moment, still the president of Nigeria has not addressed us. After the massacre in Lagos State, the government came out to say that nobody died. So of course, there's still an attempt to silence people and to perpetrate false narratives about what is actually happening. And I'm just sitting down and thinking, what are people really asking for here? What is so difficult about making sure that the police, who's supposed to protect lives and properties, doesn't kill people? Why is it so difficult for the government to acquiesce to these demands? It's I can't manage to wrap my head around that. So at the moment, we're
Apologies, her internet is a bit shaky. We've all been having that problem actually in Nigeria since the unrest. People are saying they've been cutting the cables or fiber or whatever, so it has been a bit of a problem. Chebuka, are you back?
Yes, I'm back. I don't know where you missed.
Okay.
You said at
so finish your thought. Yeah.
Oh, so I said at this moment, we're all still sitting at home. Some people cowering behind their beds for fear of, they don't know who's going to walk into their door, who's going to break down their door. And it's almost like we don't know what's going to happen next. That's where we are right now.
So, Lola, do you have... Oh, are you done? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Lola, do you have more anything to add to that?
I think that was a pretty brilliant summary of what's been happening recently. And I think it very much captures the bewilderment. But also, I think right now, a lot of people are afraid of what's going to happen next. It's like you had the Lekki massacre, you had all this violence. There were reports that even yesterday there was a lot of violence in pockets in parts of Lagos. Even overnight, there were rumors that there was an attempted jailbreak in Ikeja, where I live, and there were gunshots. It was a gunshot that woke me up this morning. So I think a lot of people are quite frightened about what's going to happen next. But I think the most painful part of it is what all of the speakers have said, which is at a point where a citizen has to, you kind of go back and look at what it is that you are asking for, what you're demanding, and none of it is unreasonable. All of it seems to fit into the responsibilities and duties of and expectations that one would have of the police. Yet people are being murdered for that. People are being killed, are being punished, are being tortured, are being beaten. And it's scary. It's frightening. And I think sometimes that perhaps that in itself, maybe that's the end game. Maybe that's what they want people to feel, because what that does is it limits the possibility of opposition or even wanting to have your voice heard. And I think that's for me one of the most powerful things about social media and what social media has given us. Just even that little exercise of being able to say, this happened to me, I think that in itself is helping, but it's, also helped to kind of galvanize this and just bring people together to be part of this movement. It's not something that's happening once in a while. This police brutality is so widespread and so commonplace that it's sickening that people are being traumatized daily.
So, Titsi, I noticed that you were doing some police duties yourself. While Chibuka was talking, so do you or Mase, do you have any questions for Chibuka and Lola?
Well, I mean, I think for me, this is across the board. I think what this moment is quite clear about in many of the moments is not this one only, but constantly we get to the point where we are forced to kind of get to a resolve around ideas. And this is something that's quite rife in South Africa, xenophobia and Afrophobia in particular, and how we reconcile this one issue that allows us to speak about a lot more issues and building solidarity across the board, inter-country solidarity in the region and beyond the region and on the continent, because, like I've mentioned, Lekki is a reflection of South Africa in 2012. It's a reflection of Zimbabwe just a few months ago. And what is quite clear is that there's a modus operandi that's functional across the whole continent. But because of the persistent issues, even especially in the South African context, how do we kind of reconcile? And I'm not speaking about South African reconciliation of we're speaking, we're sorry, and then we never change. But how do we build accountability and build a space of speaking through and healing, but also that allows us to initiate conversation, more conversation, and and build solidarity across the board? Because I think in South Africa, while it's very important for us to show up for Nigerians and for Lekki, but I think it's also, we need to be accountable for the kind of hate and the kind of abuse and the brutality that has been perpetuated against Nigerians in particular, but foreign nationals across the board, or Africans, fellow Africans on the continent. And how do we fail? Why do we constantly fail? And maybe this is what Lola was speaking about us trying to avoiding building solidarity across the board, because that makes us stronger and we can share ideas and we can speak about what's worked, because I think Lekki is a reflection of what happens when we can't speak and depend on each other and build up solidarity across the board. When we know that we have governments that are functioning to support each other, to maintain a ruling class, and we have presidents that can't hold each other accountable, and we're seeing fellow Africans, fellow Nigerians, fellow Zimbabweans being brutalized. And the most that happens has been a delegation being sent to Zimbabwe to chat about, stop it, you're not making us look good. But this is work that needs real intervention, and I think needs for us to build solidarity across the board. So I think my question I mean, to everybody, is what this looks like. And firstly, what accountability looks like as a South African. And I can't remove myself from it because this is a nation identity. This is an idea that's held across the board within South Africa. So how does that accountability and showing up look like? And maybe how do we kind of make it consistent outside of the sharing and speaking about it in our communities? But how do we move it forward collectively?
Yeah, I would agree with all that. And I would also say that I think we need a radical reformulation of how we think about this. Lola, you were saying that what we are asking for is not unreasonable. Masa, you were talking about a dysfunctional police. I think we need to change the way we think. The police are actually not dysfunctional. When you understand that the police are there to serve the state, with the command going right up to the president, it's been said. You know, in Zimbabwe, when we had the coup in 2017, we were told that we are doing this to save the party. Zimbabweans didn't listen. We have just heard that the police in Nigeria said they are there to serve the president. So the police are actually not dysfunctional. They may be dysfunctional for us. And I think this is what we have to hammer on. We have to make it clear that these are rogue governments that are functioning and enriching themselves at the expense of the citizens. And you cannot really reform such an institution. What needs to be done there is for the citizens to equip themselves with knowledge and the kinds of coalitions across borders and between communities that Mase has spoken about. But I don't think that we can really expect to reform institutions that behave in the way we have seen our police and other state agents doing. They're not going to stop doing that willingly because they stand to lose too much. The institutions, the offices of the president and so forth, they stand to lose too much. The individual police who can extort and behave in whichever way they want, also they stand to lose too much. And so we have to make the cost of that kind of behavior greater to them than the benefits that they are accruing from it at the moment. And so for them, they are completely functional. And I think that's something we really have to bear in mind.
Thank you so much. I was just going to say that we have to round up this session because we have the next panel discussion. And I think those fellows are waiting in the wings, ready to join us. So I want to say a huge, huge thank you to Mase and to Tsitsi. But I also want to ask, I think this conversation, we haven't finished it. Do you feel like there's more we need to say? I definitely think so. And let's try and plan something during this time that I have this much power to kind of just say, oh, we're going to have this panel discussion now. So maybe we meet again, maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after, maybe we bring in, other voices, because I think this is really important. What you were saying about solidarity is so key. It is just so key for us on this continent. And of course, even with Africans in the diaspora, we have to talk more and find
I totally agree with you, Lola. Oops, sorry about that. Totally agree with you, Lola. And just before I say thank you, I think that really the question is, how do we talk about all of these issues, police reforms, and so on and so forth, without really taking on the question of power? Right, the question of power. And I think that's perhaps one of the challenges that we really haven't addressed yet in our generation and the coming generations, that we absolutely have to address the question of power, what it means, the responsibilities that come with it, the accountability that comes with it, and the benefits that come with it as well. So, like Lola said, we have to bring this to an end for now, but it's really not an end. It's a real wonderful pleasure to meet you, Titsi, Dagareba, and Mase Ramaru. It's a real pleasure to be able to have the privilege to speak to you across the Atlantic, across the world, and thank you very much, Lola, for bringing all of us together. As well as, and thanks to my co-host. Wait, she's disappeared. Chibuka, where are you?
Internet issues. So I'll be back in touch with my sisters here. The wonderful thing is that we can I know how to contact them. So we should maybe try to do this again so we can talk about reform, some of the conversations that we started but didn't quite get to the end of. I really want to know your thoughts. I know there are other people who want to hear from you. So thank you very much. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
And thank you for this really important discussion and for making it the first event of Ake 2020. I think that was a beautiful thing to do, and I appreciate it. And thank you, Mase, and we also thank you, Lola.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Speak to you soon.
Speak to you soon.
Yeah.
So you can click leave the studio.
Where is it? There. Okay, bye. Leaving.
Hello, and we're already welcoming in the guests for the next panel, which is titled "Which Way, Niger?" So we're still expecting Joey Akan. We have Sarah to hear. We're hoping that Namdi Ehirim will also be joining us, but he's also called to tell me that he has some serious internet issues. Can we dive right in? And while we wait for Chibuka, I would really like to hear from Sarah to give us her take on the recent events that have happened in Nigeria. What does that spell for your future as a young person in Nigeria?
But before you do that, can you introduce yourself to our audience and tell them something about yourself, as much as you want to tell us about yourself, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay. Hello, world. Hello, Ake. My name is Sarah too. I don't know, geez, about myself. I work in the development sector on agricultural policy, but I'm also a writer. I write a monthly newsletter on youth culture, popular culture, some literature and film in there as well. Yeah, so that's
write
pretty much
Republic.
Well, I mean, every now and again, yes, I can be seen in the Republic, but I've been published in a bunch of different places. So I've been published in Quartz Africa, been published in the Republic, Open Democracy, OK Africa, a bunch of different places.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now
go ahead now.
Go. You can speak all the grammar now.
Now I can answer? Okay.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I found myself lost for words a lot this last couple of days. Watching the news has been a lot. What's been remarkable for me, a couple of things. The way that I can't but think that if we had a government that was willing to be more responsive early enough, we wouldn't be in this mess. They waited 2 weeks. And it's not lost on me that it's when the curfew, came into place. that all of the various, the ratcheting up in violence occurred. Another thing to think about is the impact of social media in all of this. For a while, we've been told that social media is just a bunch of children talking nonsense and it has no impact on the real world. The recent EndSARS protests were mobilized essentially on social media. Even the fundraising for the sustainability of the protests were, done essentially on social media. The way young people mobilize has been something that, for me, I wrote about it in my recent newsletter, where I said that it really shows us the discrepancy between the way young people see themselves and the way the country sees them. People were able to mobilize and transparently and accountably raise funds and give daily reports on the money that they're spending and how they're spending it, mobilize everything from legal aid, creating essentially a parallel office of the public defender within 24 hours. And this is all sourced and mobilized online. I mean, mobilizing medical supports for injured protesters, even before yesterday, 2 days ago. A lot of this thing really happened, because people came together, and it's probably the first time I have really seen ordinary Nigerians, come together in this way in something that doesn't really concern religion or ethnicity or anything like that. And that was pretty remarkable. As we're taking into account and we're thinking about Nigeria going forward, it's important to think about what we saw. And, over the last 2 weeks, and what they tell us about the kind of country we can be. And also the kind of country that we are as well.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Lola.
No.
Oh, we have another entrant. We have another.
Yes, that's
guest.
One of our panelists as well. That's Joe Akan. And it's actually incredible what Saratu has said, because it's something that I observed as well. And there is a sense and there is a way in which the government seems to totally underestimate how resourceful young people are. As a mother of a 25-year-old, I know that I can trust my child, and I don't understand why it is that that the older generation can look at young people and have such little faith in them. They're permanently kind of infantilized. Sometimes I think even my generation, and I'm in my 40s, I think I'm infantilized. But the real thing that impressed me, I have to say, was the way that they came together and put structures in place in the way that I think the government constantly fails to do. And I think that was, for me, that was brilliant. And what the feminist code, the young ladies, the ladies that came together, superb. But Joey's here. Should Joey tell us a bit about himself?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Joey.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Good day, everyone. It's good to see you all. My name is Joey Akan. I'm a music journalist, A&R, music journalist, A&R, podcaster, and a few other things. So what I do is in essence, I'm a cultural broker within the music industry and sometimes beyond it. So my hands are usually on the pulse of the people, or rather my responsibility is to be on the pulse of young people, see what works, see what doesn't work, see what they're feeling, and in a tangential way, just connect with everything about them. So that's who I am.
Thank you for that quick introduction. So we're doing, if you're just joining us, actually, you're watching, I'm used to saying listening because I'm always on the radio. You're watching you're watching the 2020 Ake Festival, Ake Arts and Book Festival. And our host, we're lucky to actually have our host of the festival with us, Lola Shunai, and also with us, Joey Akan, and co-host for today's panel, second panel of the day, is Chibuka Obumselu. So she's back. She's kind of like going in and out. As for myself, my name is Louis Jacobs, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to be with you and co-host with everybody else. We dropped, somebody disappeared. I guess she'll be back. So in the meantime, I wanted to ask you, all three of you, a question. Um, oh, Saratu is back. There you go. I wanted to ask all three of you, in Nigeria in particular. Yeah, you're all in Nigeria. A question before we go into this issue around where Nigeria is going and police brutality and what's going on recently. Before, there's a recent event, ongoing event as well. The pandemic is not being closed yet, right? The lockdowns, some societies have opened up a bit. We're witnessing some other societies being locked down. So we're all globally experiencing this coronavirus, COVID-19. What was your experiences? Just take a minute each, please, and share your experiences with our audience, and your thinking about the pandemic, really, and because the violence that one did to all of us is global. But although we depending on where you are in life, you get you might have different. So talk to us. Let's start with Joey. We haven't had too much from you, so let's start with you, and then we'll go to Sarah too, our second guest, and then Lola and Chibuka can take their turns. So Joey.
To tell you how the pandemic affected me.
Just
or
give
my
us a
experience of
minute
it.
or so. Yeah.
Okay, for me, it was the pandemic was interesting for me. I like to take advantage of chaos or periods where it seems as if the world is crashing down. So when the pandemic started, what I did was I moved into an isolated space, and then I launched a platform for the music industry, Afrobeat Intelligence, during the pandemic. So people were home, people needed to consume things, people needed outlets for something. And so I said, since I have freedom of movement by virtue of me being a journalist, and also like all the people I want to talk to are in Lagos, from the artists to the producers to everyone. I decided to create something out of the sadness that was happening around the world. I decided to create something better. And so my experience of the pandemic was not locked in the house. No, it wasn't. It was driving up and down Lagos, going into people's spaces, and trying to create for the general public. And to a certain degree, that was successful. On the other hand, I saw what it did to my finances. It wrecked it, to be honest. It wrecked a lot of my plans for the year, same as a lot of all my friends and a lot of people I know. But in the end, I think the benefit for me for the entire lockdown was it taught me a lot about myself. It taught me a lot about my country. And then above everything, it showed me that there can be hope despite all the evil that's happening around us, despite all the doom, the gloom, everything that's happening around us. We can find a way to always, always find the light. That was my experience.
Thank you. Saratu, are you still with us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, your turn. Yeah, you know.
I was also really busy as well, just like Joey. My job didn't pause. Um, I had to just keep it moving. My meetings all went online. So what happened for me was a sort of like a blurring of the lines between work and home, because I've basically just been home the whole time. My dining area, where incidentally I'm talking to you right now, is also my office. And it kind of, it very much blurs the lines for me in terms of what that whole work-life balance thing just gets thrown out the window. That was one thing. Another thing is also that the added uncertainty. A lot of people lost their jobs in this time. A lot of people, the funding for their work, up in the air. And you start to realize just how vulnerable we all are. There's most of our careers don't have the resilience to withstand not being able to go out and travel. When you don't have that resilience, then that's it. What's going to happen? I mean, I work in the development sector. So anything that means that, for example, negatively affects the economies in the EU or the US, may just find its way affecting your own personal finances. So if you have, if you're getting USAID funding or DFID funding or EU funding, and they for any reason have to pull back or have to manage their funding, that's going to affect you as well, whether you can continue with your job or not. And I saw that clearly happening, for a lot of people in my sector. I've been incredibly lucky. I continued having paychecks throughout the worst of the lockdown, and but a lot of people I know can't say the same.
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, Lola, you want to go ahead?
Now,
she dropped off.
I think it would be better to hear from them.
Okay, yeah. But we know what you were doing. That's why we're here. Okay, so Chibuka, I know you are also guilty of the same thing Lola is guilty. That's why we're here. But we have somebody else new who's supposed to be a new guest.
Yep.
All right, so Chibuka, you keep going back and forth. So going in and out. So tell us quickly, 1 minute, what was your period, the pandemic period, like for you, except everything that you had to do with Ake books. There was everything else, but we know what you're doing with Ake books.
Well, yeah, just like Sarah, so I think I was also one of the lucky people who could keep their job during the pandemic. But I was home every day for, was it 4 weeks? I can say that I nearly went out of my mind, but there was some uncertainty. I mean, am I going to catch this virus? At some point, myself and my siblings were like, we all have to get this thing so we can get it over with and know that we've survived it and move on. But, I think I managed to handle it well. Having work to sort of keep you occupied was good for my health and also just for my general well-being. So, and I was with my family. I wasn't by myself, so it wasn't so terrible. I think I'm here, so I made it through.
So when you refer to your job, were you referring to your work at Ake Books?
Yes. So
okay. So I thank you. You answered the question. The point I was trying to make is that Lola is going to have to employ the rest of us, all of us, because she's keeping somebody happy.
Yeah.
And that person.
Yes. Even you. Please.
All right. Even you too. So we lost somebody. Somebody was joining us, and he might have dropped out. If he hasn't, Lola, let's just hear from you. You deserve, your voice is important, so we need to know what you're doing as well.
Well, this panel is supposed to be about listening to these amazing people, but for me, the lockdown was all work. I was working 18, 19-hour days. And I learned a lot about myself as well. And I think the one thing that I learned that was most reinforced is the fact that I actually really love freedom. I really, really value my freedom just as an individual to be able to do certain things when I want and how I want. And I kind of had up to now believed that it wasn't possible to ever have that. But now I know that it is, because I lived that through the pandemic. I had to, of course, work hard so that I could offer stability to the people who had been working with me. And I'm very proud to say that throughout the pandemic, no matter what happened, I made sure that the people who were working with me were fully paid and were as happy as was possible. So we worked a lot together. We would, work or do Zoom calls to keep things moving. But it was very good for me. I also like my own company. I'm not I'm not sociable by nature. So it was fine.
I just want to quickly add that she actually woke up one Sunday morning and worked 18 hours because she thought it was Monday.
Well, um, well, thank you for putting all that effort in. That's why we have, what we have. So we have Nnamdi Ehirim has joined us again. So Nnamdi, welcome to the panel on Which Way Nigeria. That's the title of our panel. So please introduce yourself briefly, and let's know who you are, and we'll take it from there. You have to unmute yourself as well. Nnamdi, can you hear me? Can you hear any of us? All right. So there seems to be a technical thing going on there. He'll join us when he's able to speak. So now I set you guys up with the question of the pandemic and how you dealt with it, because there's a crisis in our country, Nigeria, and that crisis is affecting everybody else. So it's really a question of, there are people who like Nigeria for whatever their reasons, and when Nigeria hurts, or when any other country hurts, really, there are people who are hurting at the same time. So I'm very interested in finding out how you're coping, where you were when you heard about the massacre, especially yesterday, a couple of days now, and if you would like to also talk about your participation in the EndSARS protest, So let's take a couple of minutes. We have a couple of new people, but so we know what the question is, right? So let's just introduce our new friends. We have Kola Tumbosun, is that so? Kola Tumbosun, can you hear me? He can't seem to hear me right now. So, and I don't think Nnamdi is hearing me. If either of you can hear, just go ahead and say something. All right, so we'll come back to them. So let's start with, who should we start with? Joe, we haven't heard from you. Were you going to say something, Lola?
No, I was just going to say that Joey was going to answer the same question that Saratu answered at the beginning.
Yes, very question. Yeah. So, Joey, are you ready to go for that? Joey?
Yeah, hello?
Yeah. We can hear you. Go ahead. We can hear you.
What question, please?
Oh.
Where were you when you heard about EndSARS, and how do you, when you reflect on the last 48 hours, what's going through your mind?
Okay, the EndSARS. I took the EndSARS personal. I took the EndSARS campaign personal for a number of reasons. Apart from the fact that, one, it was very personal. I've been kidnapped once, and I was almost kidnapped the second time by these officers. The first time was very weird. I had just finished. I'm an A&R. I make music. Even though I don't amplify what I do there, but I make music. So I just left the studio in VI, working with a popular artist for a new project. And on my way home, just at Muro Kunola Junction in VI there, I was in an Uber. I wasn't driving. Just as we got to a checkpoint, and instantly these people were not interested in having a dialogue or identifying myself. And instantly I identified myself. Hey, this is who I am. I'm a journalist, and here's my ID card. And they're like, no, you're a Yahoo boy. And I'm like, how? How did you people get to this point? So like, let's search you. I come down, and then they tell the Uber guy to go, and I tell him, see, don't go, keep it on. I'll pay whatever the cost is, but don't leave me with these people here. Apologies. And I was taken. Guns were pointed at me. I was pushed into a vehicle, and I was taken down to the mainland. And also there, all in that vehicle, while nothing happened to me, other than, extreme insults on my person, I saw them carry out some of the most dastardly acts. These people were not enforcing crime. These people were not trying to keep the city safe. These people were not trying to ensure that we had no disturbance in the metropolis. All they cared about was one aim. They were money hunters, they were robbers, and they were kidnappers. So all of it state sanctioned because they got a gun and they got a badge. So um, so when this came up, when EndSARS came up, immediately it came up. I took it personal because it's something that I can connect with. And so I didn't play I didn't play a leadership role in it, but I amplified. But in some areas, my microphone is loud, so I amplified and I came out to protest every day, almost every day, except on the days when I didn't feel strong health wise. But I came out to protest every day, and what I saw was amazing. I saw people, bridge divides. People like reach across the chasm between us and collaborate for something bigger because this affects all of us. I saw that happen. That was beautiful. Warmed my heart. I also saw I also saw people put their lives on hold to carry on the problems of a generation on their shoulders. That in itself is inspiring. I saw I saw us build systems that we didn't know were possible. I saw us build advocacy systems. I saw us build response systems. Shout out to the feminist coalition for doing all the important work that they did. I saw how they powered a number of things in this protest, and that inspired me a lot and made me so happy. It gave me hope that irrespective of how much we're in the rut as a country, irrespective of how things look dark, there's still some form of hope for this generation. We can reach across our divides. We can, reach across the things that keep us apart and collaborate for something bigger than all of us. That's one thing. The last 48 hours have had me in stitches. It has had me in tears. It's had me reconsider my thoughts or my thoughts on this country because I do not understand. The day this happened, after Sunday, from Monday, there was an air of there was an air of foreboding in the air. We knew something was going to happen, but what nobody could fathom, or rather, what nobody could project or imagine, was the government turning on their citizens in the most brutal manner. On that day, I wanted to go there, but I got a lot. I wanted to be at the toll gates, but I got a lot of people, most of them family, begging me that, hey, something is going to happen there. Something is going to happen there. For those who could share online, they shared that, hey, something is going to happen there. Nobody knew how dastardly it was going to be, but people knew it. And so watching the scenes from, I was at home when it all happened, watching the scenes from home, watching people get killed, watching people die live, watching people lose their breath, watching people bleed out, watching the chaos and seeing the army and the forces that are meant to protect us go hard on its citizens for doing what? For saying we don't want to be killed, for saying we want a system that favors us, that helps us achieve the things we do. Young people in this country, we work really hard. I ain't gonna lie, we work really hard. Forget all the older generation telling us that we're lazy. We're not lazy. People are building systems from nothing. People are building businesses from nothing. We saw what happened with Paystack through all this within this period. People are doing things that bring glory to this country, that generate value for themselves and a lot of other people. And at every point in time, this country tries to take it, even though we do it in spite of all the hurdles that are placed in front of us. This country still finds a way, manufactures the most insidious ways or the most blatant ways, as with SARS, to keep us under, to take our work away from us, to take our lives away from us, and to ruin us. And so people fighting for that, people fighting for the chance to live, people fighting for the chance to say, hey, I deserve a country that works for me. Is no reason for them to be brutally killed and murdered and attacked in the way that they've done. So it's given me a lot of thoughts about this country, and none of it is negative. A lot of it aren't positive, because if your country could do this to you, if your country could blatantly attack you in front of everybody, with the world audience watching, then what have they been doing all this time when we didn't have this amount of access to social media? What all the stories they told us as kids, all the stories we grew up ingesting as fact. what were they really facts? Or did we not just have people with independent ways to verify and to bring out the truth? And seeing the aftermath of what is happening, the aftermath of that event, seeing people try to gaslight the populace, seeing people deny what everybody saw live. People are telling us, forget what you saw with your eyes, listen to us. That doesn't bode well. And it's systemic. It's not just, it's systemic, even though they've not gotten their stories right. So everything is up in the air. It's all systemic. It's making my heart break for this country. And there's only as much hope as you can hold out in a place where oppression, lies, and evil is allowed to run supreme, state sanctioned.
Thank you, Joy Akan, for that clarity. Saratu, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Your turn. What was it like in the past few days for you? What has it been like in the past few days, and what are your thoughts? Let's just make it simple.
So, watching everything devolve, it's very hard to think. I mean, because for about 2 weeks, people have come out every single day. It didn't take long after the first few, protests for the protests to, get, the process to get intimidation from police. I remember the first time, that the first day, I think it was not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before, where we went out to protest. This was just like the second day of protest in Abuja. And, the previous day, police officers had met with the protesters and they had insisted that they wanted to see the IG. It was a Saturday. Around 7 p.m., these protesters had gotten there around like 11, maybe 12 in the afternoon. They stayed there all day, saying that they want to see the IG. This was outside the police headquarters in Abuja. And around 7, they fired gunshots in the air, tear gas. I remember meeting my friends after and seeing just how despondent they were that the police would shoot at them. The next day, Sunday, I joined the protest, and we also wanted to go back to the police headquarters. And we didn't even get, we had walked maybe like, it was like from Unity Fountain in Abuja to the police headquarters, maybe like a 45-minute walk. We were about halfway through that walk when we saw a police line ahead of us. We didn't want to get too close. The procession stopped maybe. Can you hear me? Yeah. Maybe like 5 minutes away. And after we had stopped, we saw the police firing off tear gas. The process, we didn't move, we stayed there, because we had come prepared with baking soda and Coke and everything. But then we heard live rounds. After we heard the live rounds, people scattered and we ran because they were really shooting at us, and the water cannons came. And we were running to safety, but then the police was running after us with, shooting down the streets, because we, protesters had gone into like the side streets, and they followed us into the side streets and they were shooting at us and, coming at us with batons. This was the first round of protests. My friends and I managed to make it to safety, mercifully, without getting hurt. We were able to get another friend of ours who wasn't among us to come and pick us up in his car, come get us. We were recuperating when we found out that the police, that the SARS had been dissolved. That was the day that we got the notice that SARS had been dissolved. Some 45 minutes-ish, 30, 45 minutes after that announcement, police was shooting at protesters again. And yet again, we had entered the car to go rescue some other friends. Around the time, that first time that we had left, we had rescued a girl as we were escaping. We managed to rescue a girl who was being beaten. 6 policemen were beating this girl. She couldn't have been older than 21. They were beating her with clubs. By the time we managed to rescue her, like her arms were like swollen. And I remember, thinking to myself, because she said that as they were beating her, they kept screaming at her, "Who paid you? Who paid you?" As if it's completely improbable that people were motivated to come out because they felt strongly enough about the issue, that this thing actually affects all of us. And we had come to represent, we had come to lay our very legitimate complaints. If you talk to anybody, they would tell you, most people know someone who has been affected by SARS or has been affected themselves. So it's a very legitimate thing that, it's really, really easy to rally people around, because frankly, it's something that we can all recognize. I've protested since that time. The very next day I went back out, and the next weekend, because I work during the week. So the next weekend I went back out. One of the things for me that I've, that was transformative for me was watching these young people kind of with their hearts on their sleeves. A lot of us we came together because we believed that we were not even asking for much. This is something that everybody can agree that I think like, what is it? It's not this SARS. This same SARS that everybody can agree is just really awful units. We could all agree that this unit needs to go. It was the simplest of rallying cries, because, there are not very many things that Nigerians can come together and agree on. There was a hilarious Trevor Noah thing about, this particular issue, where he was talking about how Nigerians don't agree on much, except maybe when Super Eagles is playing. And it's true. That's the only time they can actually come together. But we all agree that, yes, this SARS needs to go. It needs to end. And with every single day that the government decided to not answer protesters, even just a very simple, that's actually blowing my mind here, is that it doesn't take much. Nigerians, our expectations of governments are subterranean. They're underground. Nigerians don't expect much of governments. If they had even just arrested a few SARS officers, gone to some homes, given compensation, done some other things, but those state level panels for me were like, we all know that these state level panels, there have been so many reports, panel reports, all of these things have happened in the past. Just in 2019, the Nigerian government had a big panel reports that they didn't act on. So you can't tell us panel again, because we already know that one. If there was, and it's very difficult to have anybody to believe that these people are acting in good faith when they're shooting you in the same breath as saying, come and negotiate, or come and sit down and talk to us. Why should anybody come and talk to you when you're shooting at them that same day? Just earlier that day, people would tell you that the police beat this person, or, the police shot this person, or, that same day, Feminist Co is paying for legal aid to rescue protesters. And when the lawyers go there, they'll say that, no protester has been arrested here, even though they have been, because their plan is what their plan always is, to kind of keep people there indefinitely. It's very difficult for anybody to agree that these people were actually ever, planning to meet people halfway. So I guess for me, when I'm thinking about the last few days, I just keep thinking, if you had just met the very low expectations that Nigerians had, all of this could have been avoided. In all of this that we were talking about, no arrests were made. There was no effort to actually, they'll be nodding along and agreeing with you, but they're not doing anything to address the issues that were being raised. And people are cynical for good reason. So you can't assume that, it's for people to just go back home. There's no reason for people to believe a word out of any government official's mouth in this issue. Because we've had EndSARS protests in 2017, in 2018, and in 2019. And people weren't asking for much. People basically had to create systems, like Joey had said, where we very much had to like take care of ourselves, because it was clear that the Nigerian government had no intention of doing that. Ordinarily, I mean, feminist cause work that was absolutely inspiring, in their funding, the crowdsourced funding, and their mobile, and people like FK and Adetola and others who are able to do, legal support. That was inspiring. But imagine that we actually have the NHRC, we have the Legal Aid Council. These are all, public services that have failed Nigerians. The reason why these private individuals, these young people, had to open their address books and make all sorts of calls was because Nigerian government was failing Nigerians at every single turn. When the Lagos State issue happened, ordinary Nigerians, I mean, were trying to call the LASIMA toll-free numbers, and they weren't working. What would have happened if ordinary Nigerians didn't immobilize private ambulances? So when I think of these last few days, I keep thinking of how resilient we have to be every single
time. We have Chibuka. Do we have any other young person on right now, other than? All right. So Chibuka, we have you. Your turn. Although you're co-hosting, but you still have experiences, right? And you were participating in some way or the other, or not. You might have been very busy, actually. You should have been. So in the past couple of weeks, what has it been like for you? What's been your own experience?
It's been really, I've been really frightened on one hand, but also proud of the people who are taking to the streets to make our voices heard. I've been one of the people who are calling ourselves the online protesters because we can't be out on the streets. And what we've been doing is making sure that people know what's happening, what the police is doing, and what the government's response is. And I think it's been important in a way for documenting what's happening, because as we've seen, the government has tried to change the narrative and to deny some of the things that has happened. I mean, I saw a photo of a newspaper saying SARS has been disbanded due to Zaha Buhari and somebody speaking of her. I'm like, where, when, how did that happen? And there's also, the governor saying that there was nobody died on Tuesday night in Lekki. So people online protesting, trending the different hashtags, getting the attention of governments outside Nigeria, high-profile people outside Nigeria, has actually done a lot to actualize the movement. I also said that I've been frightened, because people have gone out peacefully, holding hands, singing chants, not causing any trouble, and the government has responded with force. The police shoot at them, they shoot water cannons at them, they shoot tear gas at them, and especially seeing the government use these heavy resources. You think about all the buildings that have burnt down and there was no water, all the places that have experienced acts of violence, and then they say, oh, the police were not well armed, the soldiers didn't have the right arms to fight off these people. But the government could bring out the artillery for peaceful protesters. And a number of us were saying, you know what, they can't kill everybody, we'll keep going out every day. They're not going to kill all of us. But the state has shown us that it looks like they're willing and they're prepared to do anything to silence us. And that frightens me, because it stops you in your tracks and makes you ask, what can we do? What else can we do? Is this how we're going to go on? Is this how we're going to live? Really? But I think that some people have heard the message, and it's up to them to take it to implement some kind of reform. We've seen the governor of Lagos State, regardless of the things that have happened in the past few days, he has said, oh, they set up a panel. That's a good first step. And we want to see that replicated across other states in the country. But then there's also the problem of a lot of this implementation.
Are you with us, Chibuka? Chibuka, are you still with us? All right, we might have lost her. So one thing that is interesting to me, I think Chibuka is in Lagos. Saratu Abiola is in Abuja. Is what I gathered, right? She can't seem to hear me.
Yes.
You are in Abuja.
Yes.
Okay, and Joey Akan has joined us, has rejoined us. And where are you located in Nigeria?
I'm in Lagos. I'm in Lagos.
All right, so that at least we have two cities that we can compare. We lost. I think she's going to join us again, but I want to read a short quote for us, all of us, and I'm reading from the quote was made by somebody that I think would have been participant, at Ake Book Festival. I'm not sure if she actually made it there yet, but Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, the writer that many of us like very much, it was quoted I'm quoting her from an article in New York Times that she wrote recently, and I'm not doing this to necessarily criticize the personality of the president, but to raise an important question. And I'm quoting, I quote, "Under his leadership, insecurity has worsened. There is the sense that Nigeria could very well burn to the ground while the president remains malevolently aloof." And it's this quote that I'm putting before you, because she's one of you as well as a young person. And that's a damning um, sentence, a damning summary about a person, an administration, a generation. Um, I want you guys to give it some thought, but I would like to hear your response, especially that malevolently aloof, the malevolence that you're describing, that I kind of hear in the grief of your in your voices, and so let's see who's just joined us. Colatu must have joined us again. I don't know. Can you hear us now?
Yes, I can. Hi.
Oh, well, welcome back. So we've been talking about which way Nigeria is going to go. We've had wonderful conversations, but the way we've been doing it is you have to tell us a little bit about yourself since you're just joining us. So take 1 minute, not too much time. We have questions and time is running down. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a writer. I'm a linguist. I was until recently a British Library Shevlin Research Fellow in London, but I've been back in Lagos since March because of the COVID pandemic. That's all about me.
Oh, okay, very good. We won't take too much of your time. I think how are we doing on time, Lola? Do we have some more time? Oh, she's not responding right now.
Yeah, we still have some time.
We still have some time. Very good. So tell us quickly, what was your experience during the pandemic like? And if you take a minute to do that, and then you compare it to what your experience has been in the last, couple of weeks, and particularly the last couple of days. So, take 2 or 3 minutes and just give us the rundown on that. And then we'll go to the Ngozi Adichie question. I'll repeat the question.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Like I said, I returned in March. I returned March 20th, actually the day the border was about to be closed because there was panic. Everyone was worried about what is going on with the pandemic, how, it's going to be a lockdown. Britain was going to lock down its country. Nigeria was given a deadline. So I arrived right at 3 hours before the lockdown, and I went straight to self-quarantine in a hotel. I stayed there for a bit. After like 2 weeks, I stayed. I found myself negative, and then I went home. From then, things have settled into a normal routine. Our kids' schools were taken online. So we, every morning we woke up, set them up on the computer, had to train music, or they had to train us, as the case may be. And everything went into that routine for, a while. So September, school started opening again, and then we had to decide whether we wanted them to go physically to the school. We had to pull our daughter out of her old school because they didn't give us enough assurance that they were safe and they were taking this seriously, and the students were packed in one room. But our son's school, they turned it into a 2-day physical school and 3 days out of school online class. So that went well. And everything again settled into a familiar routine until the other issue joined, when many of the students had to be pulled out of school because they're worried about safety and all of that. So we have been at home, taking care of them, spending time with them as the earlier lockdown had mandated. You want me to talk about the current situation?
Yes. Have you been involved? Yes. Have you been involved in any way at all in the protests? You don't have to tell us everything, of course, that you don't want to tell us about.
Yeah.
But also, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on the whole thing?
Yes, on the very first day of the protest, which was, I believe, Saturday of last week, not this last one before, I went out with my wife because I wanted to show solidarity with the people on the streets. This last COVID, the SARS protest, I think had started because someone had been thrown out of a car in Enugu or something like that. But anyway, people had had it up to here, and they wanted to get out and show their discontent. So we went out. I went to Ikoyi. There was a talk that people were going to Deputy Governor's house to show their discontent. We went there. When we were coming back, they blocked the toll gates. The roundabout at the Bodilon area. And we had to stay there. We actually planned to be there for a few hours because they stopped every car from moving. Even though we were part of the protest, we had to stay there for several more hours. And then eventually we left the driver there in the car and then walked across the bridge and then went back home through a minute. That was the first day, I believe, of the protest. And we went there because I personally believe that, this protest had, it was about time. Police violence in Nigeria has a storied history from, it's not even now. Kunle Adepeju in 1971, Fela Kuti in 77 or 76 or thereabout. The June 12th protesters been shot. Police have always had some kind of impunity. They've kind of carried themselves over many years as a kind of people above the law. It's not SARS. Again, it used to be military police. In some cases, fellas were army people. But there has always been a kind of impunity. The state behaves as if it's above the law and it can do whatever it wanted to do. And so I want to show solidarity and show that, the young people have come. This is our own generation. There's been other protests before. There's enough, the one the protest against Jonathan. There have been other ones even way before then. But this is a new generation. These are young people who are fed up, who have been harassed, people who are actually professionals, who go, who have whatever, they have jobs, they have, sometimes freelance jobs that pay even more than people who have to go to physical places. But they dress unconventionally, they live their lives on their own terms. But that has not fit well with the system that has been in place for a long time that says that you have to a certain way of, it's not even about how they look, because most times it's just extortion. It's just a way of state exerting its power, and the people, agents of state, not changing, not evolving, not adapting to the new environment where a 19-year-old can have a job that pays $5,000 a month, and decides to wear dreadlock and paint his nails, and to live our lives the way we want, the internet generation. So that was what I was hoping for, that people would see that a new day has come, and that the government, for once, would recognize the right of young people to protest and give them into their demands. There were nominal concessions like, oh, we set up panels and all of that, but people had been shot a couple of days after. I didn't go the test, but I went the first day, and we were seeing on the screen as people were still being harassed. When they eventually became cautious, took it a few days ago. I wasn't there either, but I was online. I was monitoring, and I saw those videos. People were shot. It seems like we're now in a state of nature where, the states that the government wanted us to be in, it seems, where the police are back on the road, everybody's scared for their lives, we're all locked up in our houses, praying that the police will come back and save us. Whereas what they actually want is power, the power to be able to do whatever they want. And we've seen videos of people just running around, running away from the police and being shot at, which is quite terrible. And it's not a Nigerian, we can connect it to many of the things happening in other parts of the world as well, in the US, etc., where lives are not being given the dignity they deserve, and agents of state can do whatever they want without accountability. So the government has been saying all these things about, they're making all these promises and all these empty speeches, but the only thing that could have made people feel that anything substantially good, positive was happening, was to arrest a few people and put them on trial, right? So that people can see that actually you understand what we're saying and you are about to make steps in the right direction. But instead, we get the show of force, which just reinforces that everything people have been complaining about for the last 13 or so days has fallen only on deaf ears, and the government hasn't said, the president at least hasn't said anything. And then there's a military angle that was introduced a couple of days ago. So it's been very depressing. It's not where I thought we would be at this stage. But, the people we voted in the office, they're who they are. But, the best thing to do is to keep hope alive. But, it's very dispiriting. And again, in this shadow of uncertainty, I don't know what is going to happen, what's going to happen next. I'm happy to read from Shrinka and Chimamanda. It gives me a kind of peace that I didn't know I needed, to say that at least there's some adults who still exist. And no matter what happens now, people have seen and heard what we have done.
Thank you very much. I just want to say, before we respond to the Chimamanda question, I just want to say that one of the listeners actually posted the quote. So it's important to understand that many people are listening and watching. And and you please participate. We need questions. Send your questions and your comment, and if we can get them in, we'll definitely do that. All right, so the quote again from New York Times, I think it came out yesterday or the day before, is from Chimamanda, one of the sentences from a paragraph, and the title, I think I found the title of the article in New York Times is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, Nigeria is murdering its citizens. And subtitle is Under President Muhammadu Buhari, there is a sense that the country could burn to the ground. All right. So that's where the quote is coming out from. And I'm doing this, I'm not really doing anything political as regards to the personality of Mr. Buhari or anything. But the reason I'm saying this is that this is a damning quote. And the quote is, I quote, under his, I said, I think I just said it, I'll say it one more time. Under his leadership, insecurity has worsened. There is the sense that Nigeria could very well burn to the ground while the president remains malevolently aloof. So let's hear from particularly from the young folk on the panel. This is a sense of something that I have gotten a lot from young Nigerians, this sense of hopelessness or aloofness from older generation or their parents in particular, or the society as a whole. And I think that if we're going to be honest to ourselves, the young people that were killed at the toll gate may not very well know that at least the generations before them had it better somehow, you know. So to you young folk on the panel right now, let's start. Who haven't we heard from? Let's start from. I can't see everybody, so I don't. Thank you, guys. Where should we start from? Let's get it from one of the ladies. Ladies first, always. So, Sarah, we have to. You're a guinea pig because Chibuka is our co-host. So we start with you, and then we'll go to Chibuka, and then we'll take Lola. Lola, we have to hear from you as well, and then we guys will go next. How do you what's on your mind when you hear that comment?
Adiche's comment?
Yes.
I mean,
That's damning. As for the entire society, not just the president and
well, the thing to note here, I, I think it's important to note that it's not necessarily his reticence with public speaking that is a problem. Angela Merkel doesn't like to talk on camera. It's one of her least favorite things. But the average German person very likely doesn't see her as this caring, malevolently aloof person, because the actions she takes seem to come from a place of giving it. Now, the thing with Buhari for me is that he's not saying anything, and then what he does. So here's the thing: the military isn't getting out of bed unless the president says so. That thing that we saw happen 2 days ago in Lagos at the toll gates, that needed to have come from very top, because I don't see the president, I don't see the army mobilizing to accost protesters without the president's assent. Nobody is commanding the armed forces without the president's assent. At the very least, the chief of armed staff, and which is again from the very top. Again, I don't think that these things, just sort of happen without his knowledge. So, as far as I'm concerned, I put the blame on that. I don't care. I know that we don't know how many people died. We don't even know how many injuries, how many people were injured. We don't know what happened. We do know that we saw a guy having to get bullets pulled out of his thigh. We do know that some people died. According to Amnesty, 10 people died. We don't know really. But whatever it is that happened, I placed the buck. I mean, I know a lot of people are blaming Sanwo-Olu, and sure, I mean, I get that. It's his state. He's the governor. And again, he can't have not known, that whole switching, that whole pushing the curfew back a few hours, for me just looked like a plan for possible deniability. But at the end of the day, the fact that the army was involved tells me that came from the top. And and also, let's not forget that when the president was told about what the protesters are demanding, he laughed. So again, we've not heard Buhari talk, but we've seen his body language, and we've seen his laughter, and we've seen his actions, which for me speak louder than anything. The only thing I need to know right now is that the president said 5. Obviously, these people think that this was, I'm sure, given their political, outlook of everything, they think everything is about politics. I'm sure they probably think PDP is paying for it. So I'm pretty sure their outlook is they're not looking at it as a genuine demand. They're probably looking at it as, who is bankrolling these people to say all these things? Where are they getting the money to run these protests? Who is paying for this, right? And whoever that person is, the political enemy. So they're not thinking about it, I suspect, in terms of, what this and this and this is what the people are saying. Does it have any merit? These things that they're saying, does it have any merit? Their suspicion of these state level panel, does that have any merit? We're not having substantive conversations with this government. In their minds, they're having political ones.
Your turn. Where is she? She keeps disappearing. She's gone for now. Chibuka. Oh, she's there. Hi, Chibuka.
We only
Can
have,
you hear us?
there are two things I want to say very quickly. We've
Okay,
only
go
got
ahead.
6 minutes left. And
Oh,
an
we have to round
announcement
it
to
up.
just come in that the president is going to address us at 7 p.m. So that's probably something a lot of people of us here also want to see. So I think it's a good idea if all the other speakers maybe have 1 minute each to just let us know how they feel.
And also let us know what you expect from the president. So 1 minute each. We have
Yeah.
only 6 minutes. All right, let's do it quickly. Okay, so Chibuka, since we got you, are you here? She's not. Yeah,
Yeah,
she's
I'm here.
Yes. All right, yeah. 1 minute. Go quickly. It was your turn, anyways. So go.
Okay. Just really quickly, I mean, for me, governance is it's like a test, right? And the citizenry of the populace were the examiners. And if I was to evaluate the president's performance so far, then I would say that malevolently aloof is apt, right? But what do I expect from him? I expect to see some change. I expect to hear that the people responsible for some of this violence have lost their jobs, will be arrested and prosecuted. I expect to hear that there's going to be some kind of reform. There are going to be policies instituted to make sure that nobody again has the power to perpetrate this kind of violence on the scale that we have seen. I expect to see that state governors have the power to actually protect the citizens of their states from violence of this kind, and I expect him to do better in the future. It's
Okay, your 1 minute is up.
yeah,
Sorry.
but what would it
Joey, you're next. You have 1 minute. I'm counting down, please. Actually, let me really truly count down. Go ahead, Joey. You're muted.
Bro.
So, excuse me. Ever since the president has taken seat, there's just been this anti-youth vibe that he's given. I call it a vibe because it involves a lot of things, body language, everything. It's just been anti-youth. There's never been any policy that's been targeted. Check. No policy has been targeted for the long-term benefit of young people. We've not gotten the things we want. We've not gotten a country that benefits from. So one, and seeing the event of the past 48 hours have confirmed this to me. So what do I expect from the president? To be honest, I expect nothing from the president. He's shown again and again and again that he fails us whenever we expect anything from him. What I expect to see in a few minutes from now is, hey, this has happened, blah 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 blah, and it's business as usual. I hope I'll be wrong. I hope this is not what's going to happen. But checking out the pattern over the last 4 years, I expect nothing from the president. I just want a country that works for me. I want a country that enables me to pursue my dreams. I want a country that enables us to prosper as young people and move higher than all our stations.
All right, thank you, Joey. Akan. So let's go to Sarah. To 1 minute. What do you expect the president to talk about? What do you expect to hear from the president tonight? Plus the other.
I'm not going to pass the mic because I know I've spoken a lot, and I know we're about a minute more. So I'll let.
Okay, thank you for yielding to. Let's go to.
Yes. Thank you. I'm going to be quick as well. I agree with everything Joey has said. I'm not very hopeful that anything will come out from what President said. The governor went there to talk to him. I remember one of the lines he said was, "Oh, it's one of the things I talked about in my speech." People see speeching as part of governance, as a substitute for actually making actions. So I'm not very hopeful, but I'm going to watch the speech and see what comes out.
All right, thank you, Lola. Why don't you just close it for us since this is it? And thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you so much. I have to say that at 7 p.m. tonight, I mean, like Joey, my expectations are so low from our president. And it's actually quite tragic, given how much hope I had that he would work with new energy and young people and actually make this country work. He has a lot to do to earn my respect
And I when you talk about being aloof has a sense of there's still a in some sort of act of being involved, whereas a lot of the time the president comes across as simply absent. And that's heartbreaking for a citizen, because where do you go next? Where do you go? Who can you call upon when you feel that all else has failed? Yeah, well, we're listening. We've got our TV on now, so we're going to see if what kind of tone we're going to get from the president this evening.
All right, I guess that's it, right? Thank you, all of you, for joining us.
So is that all of us?
Thank you for having.
Thank you, and thank you, Lola, for wonderful, convoking a wonderful panel, and a real pleasure to be here with you. Chibuka, same to you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah.
Bye. Go and watch the President Buhari. Go and watch Buhari's speech.